everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of Therapy Thursday in conjunction with the Top Barn 12-week challenge of 2022. This week we're going to talk a little bit about some basic anatomy you need to know in order to practice massage and stretching with your horses safely. So we're just going to talk through the points of the horse, which should hopefully be familiar to you already, the skeletal structures, some muscular structures, and we're also going to touch on balance and one-sidedness. So starting with the points of the horse, these should be relatively familiar as terms that you use regularly, but please just take a moment to have a look, and if there's anything that you're unsure about, just check where they are, because I will be using this terminology through this course. One thing I would also draw to your attention is the point of hip. So we often refer to that part of the horse as the hip. It's officially the point of hip because the hip joint itself is actually much further back and deeper, and you won't be able to feel it as easily as you can the point of hip. So there is often a little bit of confusion there around what that part of the structure is, but I'll be referring to it as the point of hip through this. So moving on to the skeleton, you can see what I mean about the point of hip and the hip joint itself, and the difference as to where they are actually located. Again, please be familiar with some of the terminology that we are using here. For instance, I would probably use scapula rather than shoulder blade, but I will try to be as clear as possible in what I'm referring to. So again, take a moment just to have a look, pause this, take a look at the image and make sure that you're familiar with all of the parts of the skeleton. On average, a horse has around 205 bones in its body, with about 20 in each of the limbs. So from the skull, we have the cervical vertebrae. There are 7. This runs down the horse's neck. It doesn't run along the mane, as you may think, but it needs to be low in the neck to support the weight that it is carrying. It doesn't skeletally join to the rest of the skeleton. It is joined by a series of ligaments and muscles known as the thoracic sling. So this brings me to the thoracic vertebrae. There are 18 thoracic vertebrae, which start at the withers. These all connect to the rib cage, as you can see in the diagram, and so reach around mid-back. You may be aware of T18 being mentioned in relation to saddle fit. That is the point that you do not want the saddle to go beyond, is that T18 junction, because that's when you're getting into the lumbar vertebra. So there are 6 lumbar vertebrae running on from the thoracic. This area has limited rotation or flexion or movement of any kind, really, which is another reason why you don't want the saddle impinging on that area. The sacrum is next, which is actually 5 fused vertebrae. The lumbosacral junction moves quite a lot. The sacroiliac joint sits underneath this, and this is where a lot of flexion and extension happens, and enables the horse to bring its hindquarters underneath to drive the power forward. So this is an area where you do tend to get a lot of tension or a lot of issues creeping in. And finally, we have the caudal vertebra, or tail. There's between 18 and 22 very small vertebrae within the tail, which is what forms the dock. It must be remembered that this is still part of the spine, and it still does tell you a lot about how the spine is functioning. For example, if a horse is holding its tail clamped down or to one side, that can often reveal that there are issues going on elsewhere, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I also want to pick up on the TMJ, so that's temporomandibular joint. This is within the skull, and it's where the upper jaw and lower jaw meet. You'll see this moving as your horse chews. This can be an area for tension, and it's also something that I'm going to cover in our next episode. And here's Mojo demonstrating it ably. So onto the musculature. This is the superficial musculature. There is a similar diagram for the deeper muscles, but we'll only be focusing on the superficial. Again, please pause, enlarge, make sure that you've had an opportunity just to get a bit familiar with some of the names. You don't have to learn them, you don't have to know them. And as I go through the massages, I will be pointing out what muscles I am working with specifically. So a very quick demo with Mojo. Starting at the skull, we have the cervical, and then we have the thoracic, and the lumbar, and the sacral, and the caudal. So I said I would talk about straightness and one-sidedness. Hopefully from this you can see why this is important. So Mojo is quite conveniently stood resting his off hind. So he has really dropped and rotated through his pelvis, and you can see that nothing is level here. Drawing a ruler across from those two widest points of his bottom, you can see that that is not straight at all. So if your horse always looks like this, it's just something to be mindful of, that they may favour one side to the other and therefore may end up with a weakness on one particular side because of their favoured way of standing. So I've attempted to stand Mo up a bit straighter. It's still not perfect, but hopefully you can see that the widest part of his backside now is slightly more level. I've added the ruler so you can see across, and we do just have a slight dip to the right hand side. He is slightly forward with that off hind still on this, but hopefully you can see the difference from the previous photo to this one. And then finally, I've drawn a vertical line down his tail, and you can see that hangs slightly to the right. Again, he isn't stood perfectly square, but as I mentioned earlier on, the tail is an extension of the spine. And so if it isn't hanging straight down, or if it's hanging clamped to one side or clamped in, it could indicate that there is an issue with them or there is an area of tension. So I know that Mojo favours dropping that hip to the right, and therefore I need to do just a little bit of work in loosening off his offside just to try and straighten that up a little bit. So following on from what I said last episode about it being really important to understand what is normal for your own horse, I find it really helpful if you can get video of your horse being walked and or trotted, if your horse and handler are up to that, just to be able to assess what is normal for them. So are they moving rhythmically? Are you seeing any areas of tension being held? Is their tail nice and fluid? Are they stepping in the order of footfall that they should for the gait that they're doing? Are they turning nicely? Are they carrying their head evenly? All sorts of things that you can really pick up from just observing what is normal for your horse. Do they favour one side? That is particularly common. So please do have a go at that and be aware of your own horse's anatomy, ready for you to get stuck in with the hands-on work next week.